Hi, I'm Zubair. Welcome to the Right in the Middle podcast. I'm a middleware architect and these are my colleagues. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Jakob Brella. I'm also a middleware architect.
And my name is Håkan Hagenrud. I am not a middleware architect. I'm an infrastructure cloud architect.
Oh, wow. And I'm Marcelo. I'm a middleware consultant.
Okay. Great. And today we're going to talk about API management in large companies and enterprise settings. So, without further ado, shall we get started?
Sure.
Okay, so please tell me, what is API management?
Well, first we need to understand what's actually an API. And the thing is, we've been using APIs since a lot of years back. We can just travel back in time and see, for example, in 2003, there was a guy working on a company and they just received an email telling them about new policies on the company. And the policy states like something, okay, from now on, every service will expose a contract.
Every service, what are you talking about, service?
Everything. So for example, you design a service to provide some data, like for example, data about your employees. So now, you're not only talk with a database or like other stuff that people use to communicate, like FTP files. No, now you need to design a service contract and expose into an interface, like for example, an HTTP interface.
And when you're talking a bit too much technical level here.
Okay, so let's
go back a bit.
Go back a bit. For example, imagine that you're starting to design a business process. And for some reason you need to figure out some data about like an employee to give the right access to like a room or like a badge or stuff.
Yeah.
So you need some source of information. And then you start to query, like for example, a database to get those information.
Okay, yeah.
It's something common in most organizations.
So in the old days, everyone would talk to a database direct.
Almost all the integrations used to happen with database. But the thing is, if you expose your source of information, you're exposing yourself. And if you need to change, like
are you talking about? Sorry, are you talking about web services?
Kind of, because if you go back to the database, you can access the database like using a driver to access directly the database. But the thing is, if I'm exposing you some functionality and I'm getting you right to the point of this source, if I need to change the source, like for example, every system needs to evolve. And if I need to evolve the system and I need to change stuff in the database, all people that interact with me need to change. But why? Why do they need to change? I will break a lot of other systems if they need to integrate with me and they have access to the source of information directly.
But why not use a database?
Well, a database?
Why not? Why have a service? Why not talk direct to the database?
Exactly, that's the problem. If you access the database and by some means you need to change the data, then you break a lot of clients. And the data.
Okay.
Imagine now that I need to build another relationship between the tables, and I need to extract another table to improve the system. People that have access to my data, they shouldn't be aware of this.
So when you talk about service, you're talking about a fixed contract between two different IT systems in a company.
And the thing is, when that policy arrived, one of the statements was you need to communicate through services interface. For every kind of communication internally on the company, it will be through services interface. And the thing is, not only that, but if you're using an interface, it doesn't matter which technology are you going to use, as long as it's strictly on the contract. And the contract, it's agnostic to technology. So I can, for example, expose something in Java, and you can expose something in .NET, and you can expose something in Ruby. It doesn't matter, because the contract, it's agnostic. And if we go further, things can go even tricky, because, now we need to make sure every single service is here. It's going to be exposed using contract. All the communications internally you'll be using this service and interface. And moreover,
When you say internally, what do you mean? Do you mean within a company or within
within the company?
So are you saying that a company has to make sure that everything in their IT system is exposed via services and talks via
Exactly.
services to each other?
Everything internally, and not only internally, but when you're starting to design your services, you need to think about publicly access. So if you're designing your services, you need to design in mind like, okay, maybe for months now, we're going to expose the service to the public. So you need to document your services. You need to think, okay, this service here, maybe it will go to the public.
But still, I'm thinking I can do this with databases. So we have an abstraction called a view in the database, which will abstract away the underlying
Exactly.
model. So could that be a way of implementing APIs?
Oh, that's actually a good question. You can, like for example, build something in front of the database to allow access, or you can just query that database like straight. But if you design something in front of the database, or using, like for example, exposing too much data like bound to the database, like the tables that are going to expose.
Yeah, but the view will not be bound to the database, so I could use that.
Yeah, but there's a problem when you just use a view, because a lot of systems today, they don't just get the information from the database. Sometimes it's like an API call to one place, it gets some data from the database, something from a file. Sometimes it uses multiple sources.
That's a good point, because and sometimes those locations they might like change. For example, now we're not going to query this database here. We need to extract this information from this IRP that we just bought now. We need to like integrate those data in order to get you access to those stuff. Or for example, when it comes to services, I'm just querying for example, new virtual machine. I need a virtual machine. I don't care about where you be constructed, where the virtual machine will spin up. I just wanted them virtual machine. I don't care about the internals. So the good thing is when you don't care about the internals, you just expose your functionality, you expose your business value, you expose just the value that people will access.
So what's all this got to do with API management?
Well, we're getting there.
Oh,
Getting there,
are you
my friend.
following this?
Yeah,
I'm
so
kind of.
I
Yes.
really understood what you said last. So from a sort of boring infrastructure perspective, I could provide virtual instances to my consumerist developers
Yeah.
in-house using either VMware or even something else. They don't have to worry about that
Exactly.
because they interact with this sort of layer in front, right?
Exactly. You build a
So
contract.
in principle, you were talking about databases, and sometimes you have to put in a new database that is not even the same. It could be some proprietary stuff like Microsoft SQL that you have to migrate to,
Exactly.
but then you can still interact through the API. Am I correct?
Yes.
And then you can change the backend.
Without
Brilliant.
without people that queries for the services to be aware.
They don't have to know.
They don't have to know.
So it's like an
Mm.
abstraction.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was my point with the database view, because I think it got very database centric, but that's only one use case. So
Yes.
Mm.
Too good to have an
we
infrastructure
clarified
guy.
that. Yeah, and
Yeah,
you
boring.
summarized it
Yeah.
very well.
Yes.
But it's true. It's
Yes.
a very nice thing.
And if you think about exposing this to the public, it can create more, like for example, revenue streams, because now we're dealing with public. So we're exposing something that we use internally to the public. Maybe you can charge people to use those services. And the thing is, when the policy applied in the company, not every service need to be designed with those interfaces and service contracts in mind, but also everyone that doesn't do that, they will be fired. Simple.
Sorry, I don't understand. Why do you fire people who don't do what? Now I'm
Well,
confused.
because now they need at that time they were in process of building something huge, and unfortunately,
In that time, what do you mean in that time?
yes, in that time, in 2003, that company wants to. They were.
Oh, this is somewhere you worked.
Oh no, not me.
Okay, but someone allegedly worked.
Yes,
there.
that company. That company was starting to grow, and they wanted to make something huge. And if you're planning like, okay, we're trying to do something really huge now, but we need to make sure that our foundation will be consistent. If you start things wrong, there's no way you get things right starting wrong. So they're like building the foundations. And that was one of the, maybe I'm just guessing because I wasn't working there, but maybe that's unfortunately a decision you have to do. Okay, I need people to follow these guidelines because I need to make sure that this foundation will be good for us to grow.
But how is this related to API management? Are you saying they needed to follow some sort of API like guidelines,
Yes.
but to do that you have to have a strict discipline with your people internally?
Exactly.
Because it's not as simple as the old way of doing things. Does
Yes.
that make sense what I said?
Well, I mean, I would use an example, right? And if I understand you correct, we could use Google, because most people know Google. I do. and Google Maps, right? So Google Maps is sort of available for everybody. I can write my own stuff who, knows who I am. But if I'm a large corporation needing map data, I pay Google,
Yes.
right? So, but they are exposing their map service as a API,
Exactly.
and they have some way of making sure that I pay for it and you don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And can you imagine now?
Oh, that's API management. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. Maybe it is.
Oh,
I guess it
no,
is.
that's
Right?
some API,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because I mean, they have to.
We're getting there. We're getting there. The thing is, when the policy applied, and okay, now 2003, we need to make sure to expose anything through APIs. Whoa, this guy is crazy. And then there was the signature. Can you guess which guy it is?
You.
No, not me. Otherwise, I won't be sitting here.
You will be having two Lamborghinis.
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll be having this conversation in other place. But it was Jeff Bezos. When the company
Oh,
was
when he
Amazon.
said we should make everything SOA.
Exactly.
Yeah, correct.
The guy was Jeff Bezos. The company was Amazon. And back in 2003, when they came up with the new policy, man, if you think, like, for example, Google made some changes in the algorithm later on to, like, removing every single, like, result that doesn't point to a, like, mobile-friendly website. The point is, now that we have APIs, and at that time, in 2003, like, for example, it was almost 100 APIs exposed through the programmable web directory. You can query that. That was only 100. But if you go forward, like 2015, it will be more than 10,000. And then, why they're just building a lot of APIs? Why? I bet everyone here has a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the reasons. Can you imagine now? At that time, we had more than 2 operating systems for smartphones. Not only Android and iOS, but we used to have the Symbian and the Microsoft. Does everyone remember Microsoft had an operating system for mobile?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, I used to have. I had like at least 2 Microsoft phones.
Too bad it didn't went well. And we can get there. Why? One of the points it didn't went well, because imagine now we have an application that needs to provide value to a lot of different operating system. Why can you guarantee that the functionality will be the same? Why you can guarantee that you're not, like, coding things 2 times? Okay, 1 time for the Android, 1 time for iOS. Why you need to?
You mean how?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
problem of being a foreign.
How can you do this?
How can you do that? Remember those contracts and services interface? If I guarantee you that if you query, like, for example, this endpoint here, I will make sure that you have your contact list. So okay, now I can get access to a contact list for every Android or iOS or any type of
This API.
Content.
you're saying.
APIs allow you to do that.
So are you saying that in the old days there wasn't that many APIs, and now
Yeah.
and you're talking about programmable web?
Yeah, it's just a directory that just fetch data from APIs.
So you're saying the number of APIs has exploded because companies are exposing their internal systems to the outside world and getting new customers doing it as well.
Yes.
And your example was Amazon, when they opened up the internal systems and they created Amazon Web Services.
Exactly. It was
Is that what
Web
you were
Services.
saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I see some problems here if I were to be the devil's advocate. So, isn't it difficult as a corporation to control the usage of the API? So you may suddenly have different traffic patterns than you used to have, and so on. A lot of technical challenges in open up your API. So I may imagine if I were a bank and I opened up my my account overview service, I would maybe make such a service. I could risk people calling it, and I have a mainframe in the back end, and suddenly everything blows up inside my corporation. How can I control all of this?
Yes, I'm glad you make these questions. Okay, the thing is, now we have too much assets to like take care. And what do you do when, for example, you have a lot of people accessing the internet and you really need to control the access and stuff? You just put proxy in front. So let's imagine now, okay, we're starting this new company here, and suddenly, okay, now we're going to have a lot of APIs. And just pop up to my mind that we can design like a proxy, and the proxy will get all the requests and pass to the real backend. So now we can have a single point of access, and we can manage which APIs are being called and for which services, and we can then expose this little proxy here to the world, and we can just start to build stuff there. Like, for example, tools that can allow developers to point. Now the backend, it's located here, now it's located there, but well, we don't want to do that, because it's not part of our core business.
So you're saying that if APIs change, this like front end to the APIs, it handles the back end stuff of different API management. I was a bit.
Yes.
The thing is, what you should be hearing is this: if somebody is trying to be really nasty, they will not affect the service or services that are located on the inside.
I see.
We put like
it's like a firewall.
It's not really a firewall,
yes,
but
it's more like a proxy.
Service, which is actually what people from the outside are communicating with.
Yes.
And if that goes down, obviously outside traffic dies.
Oh, okay.
But our internal workings will still be
works.
intact.
The thing is,
that's the infrastructure side again.
yes, infrastructure. Too glad to have it. And the thing is, if we're starting to create this kind of proxy, it will take us maybe more money than the actual APIs to code, because it's not part of our core business. So we need to, like, for example, query for a SCID for APIs.
But what was the pain point? Sorry, did he answer your question first?
My pain point is that maybe my backend is not able to respond fast enough to all the requests I'm getting, because what I'm hearing is that if I open up my APIs and I do it the right way, I will get more traffic. I will get,
and maybe you will get some unexpected traffic.
Yes, and some unexpected.
Exactly.
And it might break my backend, because it's probably more old-fashioned if I'm an old company at least.
And actually you need to put more money into your entire infrastructure to handle those requests. But the thing is, if you have like something in the middle, right in the middle of your APIs, if you have that, you can control, like put some controls here. Okay, I'm allowed just like 10,000 requests per minute or 10,000 requests per second, and as you grow up, you can just, of course, you can just raise the limits. But the thing is, if you have a single point of access, you can control everything.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, it's not that easy to just code a proxy for APIs. So that's why we need to research for the market for some APIs management vendors. Like, for example, we have a lot of vendors out there. We can use Kong. We can use Freescale that was acquired by Red Hat.
Kong.
Kong.
Yeah, there's Kong. Yeah.
And we can.
There's MuleSoft.
Yes, there's MuleSoft. There's
MuleSoft was also acquired by somebody.
By Salesforce.
Salesforce.
Mm. Yes.
Interesting.
We have a lot of vendors that offers API management. So if your core business is not to sell proxies like API management, don't go for it. The market is full of vendors offering services. So the thing is, never put more effort in something that it's not part of your core business. Mm-hmm. So now we know that we need an API management. Now we're also probably know one of the reasons that why we need an API management. But then if I get your point, like for example, we're receiving a lot of requests. Actually, that means that we have more like another type of customer.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm going to expose my functionality, I have a lot of benefits. For example, if you imagine that now I really need to put a contract here in front of my APIs, that will make people aware of my department business, how my department works. And internally, even if you're not going to expose this to the public, you create self-awareness in the company. So now every department knows the other department stuff. So now we can see the company. Like I can see that your department it provides me some value, and I can see the value by looking at the specification.
So can I use an API manager to see what APIs are available in what services are available in my own company?
And the thing is, we're talking now about standards, because of course database has standards, but those standards are not the same as file accessing. So things can get mixed. But now we're talking about exposing an entire business value through an API, and that interface it's standard. Because if we have standards, we can allow to do some kind. I can just replace this power bank here and put another power bank here because USB is a standard.
But won't that undermine my business? So now I expose everything as APIs, and I probably have made some nice mobile applications to access my stuff, and that's at least what most corporations are doing. And now you're saying that I should open up all those goodies for other people, potentially competitors, who might misuse my...
Well, actually,
I think you were saying this, that it becomes a catalog of what we provide.
Mm-hmm.
So if, let's pretend we are all one department each, I would say, well, I provide information about roads, and they come in these 3 colors.
Mm-hmm.
You would provide something else, and that would be exposed in a standardized way. Also the documentation.
Exactly.
So it's not only about accessing data; it's also data surrounding the data.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What kind of data is it? How do I talk to it? It's like a documentation and a manual.
And even further, if we think like
crazy stuff.
no,
imagine documenting. That's crazy stuff.
Oh,
Is this where like Swagger and stuff like that fits
yes,
in?
but
the
it's one of the standard Swagger.
But
I think maybe we should talk about that after we take a break in about 5 minutes. For,
Yeah, sure. But can I just get something into your heads?
Sure.
Before you guys. Okay. The thing is, every company should sell some value proposition. Everyone has a value proposition. Every product has a value proposition. The thing about API, it's, for example, how you get people to access your value proposition. An API, it's not your value proposition.
Do you mean a company selling API management solutions or a company with an API itself?
Within an API. For example, just take this recorder here as an example. What's the value proposition? It's clear. Just record stuff. But can you imagine if instead of a recording button, we had a lot of like knobs and stuff that we need, like for example 10 knobs to just start recording stuff?
It has 4.
Yeah, we're using just 2.
But
can you imagine, like for example,
or take a phone, right?
Yeah.
There will be a green button and a red button.
You just press the button.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're talking about ease of use here
Exactly.
with APIs.
But the value, the value proposition, it's not in the interface. But if the interface blocks the access to the value proposition, you're doing something wrong.
Oh, is that what you were saying API management is about? It's about taking all these services we have internally and making them more accessible to internal and external.
Both, yeah. Because
Okay, I understand that.
if you're selling a good value proposition and you're putting in front of your value proposition an easy way to get people to access it, you're not only making your customers more, like for example, more close to your value proposition, but you're also creating another revenue stream, because now you can sell this API access to developers.
It's easy and predictable, because it's going to be the same way to press the green button will be the same way next week and next
Exactly.
month. And
It will always be pressed the best.
Is this something customers or companies even care about, though, would you say? Is this something they're thinking about at the moment?
Take for example the TweetDeck. a couple of, I don't know for sure the exact dates, but after Twitter released the API, there was a guy who actually coded a nice dashboard called TweetDeck, and it was really insane because it redesigned the way that you access to your Twitter. The value proposition of Twitter was there, but the way to access the value proposition was definitely different.
But Twitter shut down their APIs.
Yeah. I'll get there.
Oh,
but,
okay.
The problem is when Twitter allowed you to extract information through the APIs, TweetDeck actually was it was the second most used third-party client.
Okay, yeah.
Not third-party client. Sorry, because the first one was the Twitter client itself. So it had like 23% market share at that time.
Oh wow.
And then Twitter bought
Okay.
TweetDeck.
And then they shut down the API.
Yeah, they shut down the API. They did a lot of mess there. But the thing is, they shut down
Yeah, I remember
not the
that.
entire API usage, but Twitter found out that okay, people are gaining a lot of money through my APIs, and I cannot.
So really, to your point about API management, what they could have done is to put some kind of API gateway management in front, and said, you need to be an authenticated user to consume our data.
Yeah, and more
But
than
it
that,
didn't exist then. I don't
Can
think
you-
it
No,
did.
but I'm saying today that
Yeah,
exists,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So then you could do this and say, okay, for people who are consumers, it's open, but you only get this data.
Yeah.
If you pay us a little bit, you get that.
Yes. That example, it's like, for example, the example of TweetDeck shows when you create another market, another revenue stream, and suddenly you build another market, like Twitter clients, and those guys are making a lot of money. And using Twitter as a value proposition.
I have
Your
seen
data.
other cases where APIs are hugely successful. So imagine Netflix without APIs. So today I can see Netflix on my mobile phone, on my PS3 at home,
Probably on this
on my
recorder
iPad.
here.
I can maybe see Netflix on this device if I tweak it enough. And that's because Netflix has opened their API, so you can integrate into Netflix.
Exactly.
You can play videos on whichever device, and Netflix does not have to maintain all of those APIs for all
Exactly.
kind of TVs and stuff. They can just provide video because that's their core business.
And it makes sense because
And-
if
and
more
that makes
people
sense.
access the API, that
Yeah.
means more people accessing Netflix.
But even the
It
big
means
one.
more people than Netflix
Yeah.
can build.
And it also brings value to a TV. Now it can show Netflix. Oh, it can actually show some content.
And now the big one is Alexa in the voice-assisted
Yeah.
home marketplace.
Yeah, exactly. That's
I was going to say, should we take a break and then 5 minutes and then we can...
Let's
Sure.
do it.
yeah.
Sure.
Break.
Oh, so welcome back, and you may notice now we have some tea and water and so
we're all set.
yeah, we're all set. So are you set?
Yes, I'm glad to be here now. And the thing is, we're talking about the value proposition interface and how you can get people to know more about your
The
product.
what?
Yeah, exactly. I mentioned the Netflix example. So
Yes.
the Netflix can provide an API. All kind of manufacturers can integrate into it and make Netflix available on their device, and that's a great value proposition, both for Netflix obviously, but also for the TV producers or phone manufacturers or whatever, which is great. When I mention this example from some customers, they are like, yeah, but I'm not Netflix. I'm just, a small to mid-sized corporation placed in Denmark, small Denmark here. So does this apply to me? Will this bring value to my business, or will it just undermine my...
But does it? I mean,
My
does it
business.
make sense to small companies? Because Netflix had a big customer base before they started expanding out with
Yeah.
the API.
Yeah, that's a
so
good
it doesn't
point.
make sense to smaller customers.
Yes, and actually, if you think like...
So, sorry,
If-
Yeah, exactly. That's a valid question. So
yes, it's a valid
yeah.
question.
Oh.
Because a lot of times we tend to ask ourselves like, okay, am I Google? Am I Microsoft? Then why should I use this? Like for example, the so-called microservices. A lot of people ask, okay,
it's the same thing.
why I should use microservices? I'm not as big as
I have
Google.
10 developers in my corporation.
Yes.
Why not just go with the monolith? Because
Exactly.
it's much more easy to handle.
But the thing with API management, it's not that you're focusing on just exposing to the public. It's good to know how things are going inside your infrastructure. Because, okay, we have like 5 services, But we need to evolve stuff. And at some point, if you really need to improve the service A, and you're just releasing another version, you want to keep track of the usage, even if it's internal. You really need to control how things are going into your business. Because can you imagine if, for example, you start to build another API and you involved in that API introducing a lot of useful data and actually removing one of the data that you think that it's useless, but suddenly a lot of cases start to happen, and wow, people are just mad because you just introduced a change and now you break all the customers, all your internal customers, and by customers I mean like people that access your stuff. And if you start to break stuff,
can we delve a bit more into that, because I understand what you mean, but I don't think it's maybe clear to the ones listening here, or how does that work? Because right now we have introduced the API, it will shield us from the implementation we have done in the back, but now we have the API and people will hammer that and integrate into that. So if we need to change the API, what do I know, add an extra field or whatever, how do we handle that? Because that sounds for me like this will be a real nightmare. Now we have 200 systems connected into a hugely popular API, and how do we handle the changes there?
Yes, the thing is, if you imagine now I have this API management stuff, and people are just consuming my APIs. Right now it doesn't matter if you're internal people or external people. What matters is I'm exposing stuff, and I really need to take care about the developers that get access to my APIs. We really need to take care about those people, because if you, by some ways, you change stuff without making people aware of your change, like for example, like when the buses line they change, or when the train arrives like late, you have a late arrival. So please just tell people. They can expect something, so they can just plan for the change. So if I'm telling you, okay, you're now using this API here, you're using my services, I'm really glad to have you using my service. But by the way, I'm trying to introduce another feature, but that feature will require you to like recode some stuff. It's minor coding, but it will require some work for you. Can I please count you in to continue use my API? I will shut down the old version in 2 months, by 2 months. And by the way, this is the new endpoint for the new services, and this is the documentation that you can use for making a change. So the thing is, when you have control over the clients that access your API, you still have the data about people that code those clients. So now we have an internal database of clients that access your API, people that code the clients, so you can notify people, because it's all about people. The softwares, they don't build themselves.
So API management is really, it's also like a portal to a lot of your potential customers as well.
Great keyword, it's a portal. Because
does that make sense? Did he answer your question as well?
I think so. So to summarize, what I heard is like, you connect into the API, it runs on an API gateway. If you need to change the version, which will happen, you can kind of introduce a new version, but also have the old one running. And because you know who are using your service, you can contact those people and telling them, okay, there will be some changes. You now have 2 or 3 months or whatever you're allowed to change. And I think that's proper warning. If I compare it with the old days where you just connected into a database or a system directly, you wouldn't know who are calling necessarily. That could be a challenge. And then if I do this change, what will break? You would probably not know. So it answers my question.
So I also understood it like this, that all of a sudden as you know what data people are accessing. So let's say I publish 5 streams of data which I think would be interested for outside clients or even within my company, and only 4 are being used. Without this kind of solution, you don't really know.
Yes.
Right? So then I would go, okay, this 5 that I think should be really valuable, but nobody's using it. why are they not using it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you get to fix so that it becomes, you just get more insight of who is consuming your data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can do that because API management, they have some features like reporting. So you can get an overview in a dashboard. Okay, this service here, it's not being used. Why? And then you can actually talk with the developers. Oh, we're seeing, by the way, you're not accessing this service here. Can we just be aware of why you're not accessing it? Maybe it's something that it's missing or a bug, or it's really it's not a value really.
Yeah, or maybe it doesn't add value, in which case you can remove the code and
just
save money.
and focus your money on something that it's really valuable for.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Where does Swagger fit into all of this? Is this the correct point to mention it? Or?
No, actually, it's a good question because taking back when you're talking about standards, okay, now we have APIs, but how to declare those APIs? Am I supposed to use Danish words to write my contract so almost nobody will use your API? And I'm going to use English? No, I'm not going to use English or Danish. We're going to use standards. But we need those standards. What happened is in the beginning there wasn't no standards to like declaring an API, and people, of course, the developers start to build some stuff that turns out they became a standards. That's the case of Swagger.
Okay.
There is an open API definition. It's based on Swagger mostly.
Is that the number one API, or is it?
Yeah, it's now I can say that now we have like two ways of declaring APIs using standards. One of the ways is using Swagger, the open API definition. It's basically a JSON file, and the other way it's a HAML.
It's what, sorry?
HAML. It's a RAML. It's a YAML file that declares your API. But the thing is, both using the same standards, not the same standard, but it uses standards in the same way. Okay, we're using JSON files, which is really easy to parse in any programming language, and we're using YAML files on the other side, which is easily parsed by any programming language. So the thing is, if you're using standards, it's not easy to get documentation about how to use those standards and also get people to work on those standards. Can you imagine, okay, now we're going to use Markdown to define our APIs. Okay, but then you need to write a parse for Markdown or your own like markup language. It's insane because we need to gather people to develop our in-house solution.
So why? So they would use this YAML or Swagger to develop the API. To do what for the API? Define it or to build it?
So the Swagger is the contract.
Yes.
It's the same as Whistle was for.
Yes, the same as Whistle.
For SOAP.
Yeah.
The SOAP creepy
Oh, it's the same
Whistle.
as Whistles.
Yes,
Yeah.
but for
Which basically leads to, I think, an interesting discussion because we tried it with SOAP and
Yes.
SOA and so on, and it didn't work that well. And then there was a breakout. Oh, let's do RESTful services because it's more flexible and so on. Aren't we getting back to the days where everything was cumbersome?
We're going back to the data, the stuff we're trying to get away
It's like,
from.
we tried to get away from this,
yes.
and now we are caught in again.
Yeah, so what's different from this new world and the old SOA world of Whistle and
can you?
and
SOAP
SOAP and all that stuff?
Well, I can think the first thing that pops into my mind. It's the problem with SOAP. It defines a good protocol, but the protocol itself, the SOAP protocol, it defines everything on top of that protocol. But SOAP needs to use a transport layer, and the thing is, almost 100% of the SOAP interactions was done by HTTP interactions, and HTTP it's by itself a transport layer.
Are you saying that SOAP is too big and complicated?
Yeah, it's too big and complicated because
Okay.
you
I
can
understand that.
You can rely on HTTP to do the transport layer stuff. It's like, for example, having a coffee on top of two mugs. Why? One mug is HTTP, the other mug containing the coffee is the SOAP envelope. Why?
But do
We
you,
already have a
But do you agree with
transport layer.
this? Do you
So
agree with
why
what
don't
he's
you use
saying?
it?
I don't understand.
It's like spin up a virtual machine to spin up another virtual machine.
This I
Why?
understand. But the only thing I've heard of in this new cool modern world is REST. You said something
Yes,
about
but
REST.
REST is really old. It was part of the Roy Fielding dissertation of his doctoral. It's really old. Back in the days of 2005, I believe. But it's too old.
For me, that's quite recent.
Actually, for the internet, it's like the prehistorical area.
Yeah.
But do you agree with what he's saying about SOAP was too complicated?
Yeah, I fully second with that. Back in the days where SOA and SOAP was the big thing, I was a developer, so I have felt the pain of SOA projects.
Especially the
So I
WS
fully
security,
appreciate that.
WS
Yeah, exactly. The
addressing
security model was a nightmare, and so I fully appreciate that things are getting more simple with the REST and so on.
Yes.
But I still find it curious that we are kind of going back to having definitions.
We're adding more until it's as complicated as the thing we hate.
Yeah, because then also we have security models. Of course, it's better today because we have separated it from the contract and so on. So we have that as a sidecar. But my guess is that over time this will maybe also get complicated or what.
It probably
Because we will get more and more needs.
And then what will happen after?
We need authentication and authorization.
Yeah, and especially authentication, authorization. If you think like mobile device, they're like they need to provide you a way of talk. It's a main feature of a smartphone is to provide you a way of talking.
I think my children would disagree.
Yeah, probably mine as well.
It's a device for texting.
It's like, what does this green button do with a sort of funny...
Let's rephrase that a bit. Okay, mobile device should provide you access to Facebook, Twitter, and some games.
Yes, exactly. Now we are there.
This is where they exist.
Now it's more up to date definition. And can you imagine, like for example, modal panels? I used to talk with a developer. Lucky him, I forgot his name, but he was trying to do a modal panel for mobile devices.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because I need to block access to calls and stuff. No, please no. A mobile device is really different. But the thing is, the users, they can listen to music, they can browse the internet, they can talk with their wives, their sons, whatever they want, while using your product. So you shouldn't block people to do stuff, and you shouldn't block resources on your smartphone, because if you're going, like for example, producing a PDF, which is resource consumption, you really need a good reason to do that on the phone. The same applies to XML parsing. It's not something really, how can I say, easy to do.
And you're talking about SOAP, because SOAP was XML.
Yes, it's XML, so you need to parse this XML. In a mobile device that needs to provide juice for other stuff like Twitter, Facebook, and games, and at some point
I do remember XML parsing was so heavyweight that
it's too heavy.
There was a couple of companies that made hardware XML parsers.
Yes, so it's too hard to parse that, and you cannot do that in a mobile device.
We're getting the same way with the new with the new REST world of APIs are getting bigger and bigger as well. I've seen some of that.
Yeah, so some APIs are really bigger.
And because they're so easy to make, one problem I'm seeing now, because it's related to this whole microservices world, is a lot of systems which sometimes were better as a monolith are now like microservice, and they're so chatty, and the calls are going over the network, so the applications are sometimes so slow.
Yeah, but you know what? Sometimes applications are slow not because of the APIs or overhead, it's because they are really slow. And that we can go back to another point, later point. So are we Google or SoundCloud or Microsoft? Because I forgot the company, it was maybe SoundCloud. They used to have a problem with that because we still need to parse stuff. Parse in a JSON, parse in an XML, or parse in a YAML. You still need to parse stuff. And that company are using like 10% of the processor to just parse JSON.
But I guess what I'm saying is,
if you're too big, you're being written to that point. So you're spending resource to do stuff that you shouldn't.
Yeah,
but that applies only to bigger companies.
But I guess what I'm saying is, because we're trying to make everything an API in companies, often some companies make a lot of stuff which should not be an API, and they're making it an API. And they're thinking that because, like, when you make something in Java, you have function calls, and some companies should be just making a new class in Java or a function call in JavaScript. Instead, they're making a whole REST API, and and there's only one consumer of that API.
Remember the value proposition interface. If you're going to expose something in Java framework, then people that will consume your service will need to use in a Java language. Okay, on top of JVM. So if they want to use Node.js, or if they want to use like a iOS web app, or iOS app, so they can't allow. They can't do that because it's a Java framework.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is don't make an API until you know that someone's going to need it, because don't just make it and say, I hope someone's going to use this API that I've made.
No, actually, if you think about...
But you can,
if
you
you're
can turn it
buying-
around. So let's say I have really cool data that I think is amazing. But I don't know if you like it. But if I don't give you the option to consume it, how will I ever know if you like it?
Exactly.
But I'm saying sometimes what happens is, like, for example, when you make a system and you make it that there's an API, the design of the system becomes very different, and you can sometimes only call a service through the API.
I mean,
Yeah.
the question is probably about
Do
the
you know what I'm trying to
granularity.
say?
I know exactly
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So let's take the extreme case. If I'm just a small corporation and I create some business functionality, in Java I will probably have more than 1,000 functions if I do it right. I will probably not expose all of those 1,000 Java functions as services.
Yes.
So how do I choose the right granularity?
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
That's,
Yeah.
that's a good question.
Yeah, that's good.
I would say always think about your business value, your value proposition. If that thing applies to your value proposition, then it's probably good to put in your API. Like, for example, if we take I like this example, like Dropbox. Dropbox, it's like a omnipresent space where you can throw up everything you want. I don't know if people used to have thumb drive nowadays. I don't know where I put mine, because I always use Dropbox or Google Cloud, or it doesn't matter. But the thing is, should we really have some API exposed, like, for example, to compute a hash? For what? A hash for a file? For what? People are not going to compute a hash. Maybe it's just for internal uses.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't connect you to the value of the Dropbox. But exposing an API to, for example, query the metadata for this file, or upload this file, or check your space available space, that's connected to your value proposition.
Okay.
So it should be present on your API.
Okay, so you need to look into your value proposition.
Exactly.
But it somehow goes against the point that somehow you maybe don't know the value. One of my colleagues, his favorite example is that the toothbrush producer, what is it called, OBI or something like that, they open sourced the API for their toothbrush. Just because, yeah, it's kind of, why would anybody do that? That's a crazy idea.
Why? Because I can.
Because I can. Yeah,
For the electrical one.
yeah, for the electrical one.
You would hope so.
Yeah, but what actually happened was that then came Disney and they were like, let's make a toothbrushing app for kids. So while you're brushing your teeth, it will show some funny video with some Disney characters jumping around, and then
So it was a good idea.
yeah, because then suddenly the kids, they want to brush their teeth because then they can watch this video, and you don't have those endless discussions in the evening. You have to brush your teeth.
But that's what he was saying. You find new markets.
Yeah, but in this case, they didn't know the market. They basically just opened up the API
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
because.
It's like building a solution, looking for a problem to solve.
Yeah, exactly. It's like- and I think that's and then it becomes difficult because they probably didn't know that there was any value into the API of the toothbrush before this somebody else came up with this crazy idea.
Yeah, but you know what? I talk about, value proposition interface, but what's a value proposition? Because, if I have an interface to something, what is this something? But to summarize, it's easy, because all of us, we need to get a job done. Even if it's from our career or about our life, we need to get something done. And it's good to have something to create gains for us. Like, for example, the toothbrush, maybe for someone, I don't know.
As a father, I know I would have liked to have this one.
Okay, first customer. But and also, we always have some pains. For example, if you're going to drink a cup of coffee, depending on the mug you have, you might burn your hands. So at some point you need something to provide you gains and relieving you pains. So if you have something that provides you gain to achieve your tasks while relieving you from some pains that prevents you to achieve the task, then you have a value proposition.
Yeah, but the thing with the kid's toothbrush, there was no way they could have known what
No,
it
they
was.
couldn't have known that this API was actually valuable. So I think, but okay, I hear what you're saying. Try to investigate into what value could this
because it
bring.
might be
and then
one,
This
not-
is probably
not
an
this
extreme
one.
case, but I'm just.
Yeah, the thing is, you don't start by designing your API without having your product. It doesn't make sense. An API comes after your product, because otherwise it's just a gate to nowhere. Okay, it's an interface to, I don't know, I didn't build it.
I think we'll have to close off soon. So have you got any final thoughts before we close off?
Well, I should have said, if you need to remember something from this talk here, always think about what's my value proposition,
Okay.
what I'm going to sell. And okay, now I have my value proposition. Then you should look for your interface.
And what's your Twitter handle? So
It's,
people can follow you.
Yeah, it's at Atasheshi. It's a crazy name for people
It's
here.
not at Marcelo.
Yeah, it's easy. It's ATAXEXE.
ATA.
Yes, ATAXEXE.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Anything else to add?
Not really. I've learned a lot of cool stuff that I didn't know before. But I also recognize some of the thinking. You know, we have this. We need to be able to control it, to get reports out of it. I mean, it's you recognize some of the concepts, even though we're talking about future stuff, right? So.
And where can people find you on social media? If you're on social media and you want to be
no,
found.
not really, no.
Okay.
So we still use a phone to just make calls. So
Yeah, phone calls.
Jakob?
Yeah, interesting discussion, especially around what was the most interest to me was how to bring value to your API, both internally and externally, making new markets even, or yeah,
And
I like that. Well, I'm also a bit old-fashioned, so I don't think I'm on any social media.
And also thanks to Kittia, award-winning filmer.
she can say its title.
Thanks a lot.
And you are?
Cool.
And I'm Zubair, and you can follow me at ZUBAIRQ on Twitter. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for watching.